Well, hello everyone. This is Al Fadi, and I want to welcome you to part two of this fascinating new video series that we have titled The Qibla Dilemma, Data versus Interpretation. And with us here in studio virtually, our dear brother Dan Gibson, who did an amazing job last time in part one, unpacking to us some of the data that he have basically published based on his own research and findings, and also explained to us the way he gathered these data. And it was very compelling, really, especially towards the end of that particular show, if people want to go back again, to see the amount of sources that he relied upon to collect these data. And in my humble view, it leaves no room for anyone to make any false accusations or emotional accusations against Dan or his research. And today, we're going to build upon that by talking about the data versus the interpretation of the data, and why is that important. And of course, with us here, as I stated, is Dan Gibson himself. Dan, welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back. Yeah, we talked last time about the mosques. There are 167 mosques that we have tracked from the first 3 centuries of Islam, but 100 of those survive well enough that we can actually go and examine them. We can date them clearly. We can look at what the Qibla was like at the very beginning, because those mosques have not been rebuilt, and so they still exist. Right. And we noted in the last video that starting in 5 after the Hijrah and going up afterwards, that there were 36 mosques that faced what I call the Petra area. It's an area in southern Jordan, and Petra sort of is at the center of that circle. So my interpretation is that it's Petra, but they point to that area, and so we'll talk about that. But that's the fact that we looked at. We found those. Then, starting in 58 after the Hijrah in North Africa, the people in North Africa and the armies marching across North Africa suddenly started using an African Qibla, something that pointed down towards South Africa. And there are 15 examples of this in the first 300 years of Islam, many more from the 4th and 5th century that follow. 29 years after that, starting in 87 after the Hijrah, the first mosque got built that faced what I call a between Qibla. I call it that because the very first mosque that was built with that Qibla facing that direction was called the Wasit Mosque, or the between, or the middle Qibla.
Yeah, so the Arabic word indicates that. Yeah,
that was the name of it. Yeah. And then following that, there are another 35 of those over the next 300 years that faced in that direction. And so we need to talk about and find out, well, what happened there?
Yep.
Why did somebody suddenly change their Qibla direction from southern Jordan and from Africa, and now we have a new one appearing?
Absolutely. And Dan, if I may comment one thing quickly about the Wasit, or the in-between, or the between Qibla, that's an interesting one, by the way. I'm going to use the devil's advocate right now and say, if someone will come back and say, well, wait a minute, it wasn't clear to them which direction is Mecca, then this will refute this argument that the Quran made it very specific and clear about praying towards Mecca. That means that it was a casual thing. Anyone could have prayed in any direction. And why do we have compasses now and apps to tell us how specifically we have to pray and to face Mecca if it was casual in the first place?
Well, yeah, we're going to get people asking us that question, and I'm going to ask you a question back. As a Muslim, you grew up as a Muslim. When your parents taught you, or at school, I don't know where you learned how to pray, was it important which direction you faced?
Oh, absolutely, of course. In fact, I remember when I left Saudi, I brought an ancient compass, not the apps that they have these today, but a compass. I still have it, that I put in front of me or near me when I'm praying to make sure, while I'm in America, I'm praying towards Mecca.
Okay. And what age did you learn to pray?
I started it, usually around age 6 or 7, they start training you. And,
That's very common. And was it important then? Did they teach you, the first thing you do is figure out which direction?
Of course. And when you go to the mosque, you know why they face in that direction and why the imam is standing there, because now you know it's facing Mecca.
Yeah, and I've met some people who said I got beaten as a child because just started praying without checking the direction,
Oh yeah,
and
they
they
take
were
it
very
seriously.
upset. Yeah, it's a
Absolutely.
very serious thing. Because in Islam, and this is maybe my interpretation, but the rites of Islam, the thing that you do as your religious duties or as your religious practice, you do them exactly right. There's no innovation. There's no new style of prayer that's come out. You're trying to follow what was laid down at the very beginning.
That's correct. Absolutely. And
Uh,
like I said, I mean, it shows that it's very important the fact that they're building compasses. These days, you have an app you can download from the App Store. In fact, I
right.
used to fly Saudi Airlines, and maybe you did fly those before, where they have
I've
an area for prayer. And while you're standing praying while the airplane is flying, if the pilot takes a right turn or a left turn, you're still facing Mecca because it's built upon Mercury and it allows it to float. Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
So the direction of prayer is very, very important. And every Muslim that I had ever met when I first went out to the Middle East all told me that everyone faced towards Mecca in Saudi Arabia, and that's the direction they prayed. But when I did my study of the mosques in the first 3 centuries of Islam, I didn't find any, not a single mosque that faced Mecca until over 100 years after the founding of Islam. And so I really struggled with that. Why? Now, maybe there are some that were torn down. Maybe there's some that were torn down and rebuilt. But why was it so late? And why are there so few of them that were out there? And so dating was the important thing. And what I noticed is that the ones that faced into southern Jordan were the very first, the earliest mosques faced in that direction. And then after that, there was this African thing changed. So I think the armies in Africa, it seemed like something happened there in North Africa. Then they didn't like what was going on over in the Middle East because right at that time they were changing the rule from the holy city to wherever it was to Damascus. And I think there was some people weren't happy with Damascus and what was going on in Damascus. And suddenly the people in North Africa sort of started facing towards South Africa and towards something. And so we'll have to figure out, and any theory that comes out is going to have to explain what happened in North Africa. And then, as we said, suddenly this Wasat Mosque got built in Iraq, and it faced Wasat between Petra and Mecca. And we need to figure out, and so anybody's theory comes along of what's happening, you're going to have to figure out why then are so many of these mosques facing the same place, and there's no erroneous mosques out there. So this is one of the challenges that we face as we come up with our theories.
Right.
Now, I found something else very interesting, especially because I've continued this study. I've continued doing it all over the last few years, and I still continue, still doing research, still looking at new mosques. And one of the things that I've discovered, let me bring up two things here very quickly. The first one was the style of study I'm doing confuses some people. And I'll explain that. Most people expect that a person goes off and he does his research off over here somewhere in some university library somewhere, and then he announces to the world his findings. I didn't follow that because I discovered my findings and I stuck them in the back of a book about the geography of the Quran, and but it was just put in there, and I wanted to feel out what do people feel about this? What kind of response do I get? And I wanted more information. This topic is so wide. It's so big. There are so many mosques all over the world, right across North Africa, and I could not possibly find them all. And so I wanted to get the word out there. And that's when we made the film, the Sacred City. It had only 19 mosques mentioned in the film, but it was enough to get people to write back. I started a YouTube channel and sharing the things as I found them. And people started writing. Muslims started writing me all over the Muslim world. I got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails. It's impossible to describe sort of just every day emails were coming in, and people said, "Have you looked at this one? In India? Have you looked at this one in Morocco? What about this one over here?" And that still continues. I get emails even this week, people asking me, "Have you considered this mosque or that mosque?" And so the conclusions that I am coming to have yet to be published. People come and say, "Why aren't you published in a journal?" It's like, we're getting ready. We're getting ready to publish in a journal, but there's so many things to still consider, so many mosques to look at, so many things to wrestle with. And so I keep finding out new things. So the last 2 or 3 months, a new book came out on Jordan. This one was on the Islamic locations in Jordan, the Islamic heritage of Jordan. And there were quite a few mosques in there I hadn't really considered before. And so I had an opportunity to start looking at these. One of the challenges we had is to figure out dates.
Right.
And when you look at the dates, I'd say, okay, here's a mosque that was built by the Ottomans, but its faces Petra. And what's interesting is that even afterwards, mosques either face Petra or Mecca or
In between.
This pattern continues. So like when I looked at one of these mosques, and then we go and visit the people, and they'll say this mosque was under the command, especially the between mosques, when we looked at them, they would go back and people say, yeah, this mosque, the original mosque on this spot, which is gone now, was built by Umar ibn Abd al-Aziz. He's the 13th Caliph. He's the one who commanded that this mosque be built. Oh, so they've since it's fallen down, or they've torn it down and rebuilt, and torn it down and rebuilt, torn it down and rebuilt. So we have an Ottoman mosque sitting there, but it's facing the between position. So it's not in the database because we can't examine the original mosque. So there are many, many more mosques. And I find it surprising that especially all across Jordan and Syria and many of these places, all of the mosques can still be categorized as facing Petra or Mecca or the between position.
Right.
So this pattern follows even though the mosques have been torn down and rebuilt.
Yep.
So you can't, but I can't put them in the database because they are. I can't guarantee that the original mosque faced in that direction.
And thank you for bringing that up, Dan. And I hope everyone who's watching, especially our Muslim friends, to hear you say this, because it shows that you're very careful. You're not jumping into conclusions. You're not saying, oh, we have a mosque built by the Ottomans, which means later, at least, and it's still facing Petra. You're saying, well, there was another mosque underneath it, and we want to be careful. Let's examine the original one. And that's really transparency of research, honesty in research, and you're not just rushing into conclusions. So I hope everyone who is watching this or listening or even benefiting from your research will acknowledge the fact that these data were meticulously collected, were methodical. You did not jump just into or rush into reaching conclusions here.
That's right. So we still invite people to write in. And if you go out, if you know of an old mosque close to you and you want to go out and check it and look at it, it may not be in the database that's online, but it might be in our list of mosques. But again, it might be something new, and we'd like to look at it, and we'd like to figure it out, because I would love if I had enough money and enough time or enough help to categorize all of the mosques everywhere to try to unravel this whole thing that's going on. But at this point, we're really restricting our data to the first 300 years of Islam, because this is the most difficult time to figure out something was happening here that set the pattern. Right. That was followed through the following years of Islam.
And we're finding this is to be true when it comes to studying the biography or the seerah of Muhammad. We're finding this is to be true in studying the Quranic manuscripts, for instance, early Quranic manuscripts. So there's a lot to be said about the first 300 years of Islam. And you're right. There is something that basically set this pattern in motion, and we need to keep digging. The days, are near when we're going to uncover possibly the origin of all of this. But at the same time, all of our findings so far points to something that began north meaning north of Hijaz, north of Mecca, north of Medina, and also started at a later time than the traditional narrative itself. All right, well, brother, I guess we can say that the series of the Qibla dilemma will continue here, but we are going to turn our attention next time to examining some of the objections raised against your research. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Very good. Well, everyone, I hope you're enjoying this series. So next episode of this particular series called the Qibla Dilemma will deal with at least the first group or maybe a couple of those objections raised, and how, in this case, Dan will address those objections and help us understand the way to respond to them. Until then, everyone, have a blessed day, and we will see you next time. God bless. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel Sira International and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.